Okay, Heraclitus. He's one of my favorites. I don't even know why, but so probably some bias there, but I don't know. I like him. He reminds me a little bit of my INTJ friend. Heraclitus is undoubtedly he is described as both brilliant and obscure. He was a philosopher of considerable influence both in his own time and also now. He was famous for writing and distributing his ideas in the form of aphorisms, that is, brief encapsulations of some wealth of ideas. So, for example, one of his most famous aphorisms is, "Upon those who step into the same rivers flow other and yet other waters." I'm going to talk a little more about that aphorism later. Many in his time found these expressions very obscure and indecipherable, go figure, calling Heraclitus the Riddler, and they didn't mean that as a compliment or as a Batman reference. Nevertheless, his various aphorisms contain a rich philosophy for the patient and thoughtful reader. Fortunately, I've got loads of commentary to help me figure out what he was trying to say, and what he was trying to say is very interesting. That example aphorism I gave about the river is a good introduction to two central concepts that are in Heraclitus's work, the flux and the logos. So when you step into a river, new waters will constantly rush past you from upstream to downstream. So they aren't the same waters, nor could they be, otherwise they wouldn't be flowing, because they'd have to stand still to be the same waters. The river is in a state of eternal flux or change in order for it to be a river, note that. Yet another aspect of the river is eternally unchanging, the very fact that it is a river at all, or specifically, you could say it's the combination of two banks with water caught flowing between them for time and all eternity. In order for it to be a river, it must have this flux, but the very fact that there's the flux causes the fact that it's a river to be unchanging. So you see this interesting tension. So the river will always be a river so long as these qualifications are met, and yet the contents of the concept river are necessarily in endless flux. The unchanging concept of river, Heraclitus calls its logos, while the content, as said, is the flux. Heraclitus believes that this is a metaphor for the nature of the entire universe. All things are in various processes of change and transformation, but they are still governed by a consistent set of rules or bounding in concepts, which he calls the logos. The Greek word logos includes a number of interrelated ideas, and it's kind of hard to translate it into English. At once, it refers to logic, also sensibleness and order, but not only in the external world, but also within the minds and lives of individuals. And, for instance, reason and reasoning are also implied by logos. It involves the idea that one's own reason, understanding, and language can correspond with and accurately represent the natural order of the world. So it also further implies language, argument, rational discourse, logical explanation, and debate as meaningful methods to discover and understand the universe. And this is a very important thing. You had Thales, who was the first one who kind of gave birth to this idea of the logos, that we can figure out what's going on in the world, and the world operates according to laws that we can reflect in our own minds, rather than it's arbitrary. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world because we're human, we're just another little piece of it. No, Thales says that we can apprehend what's going on out there through our reason, and this is the concept of logos that Heraclitus has kind of had all of his predecessors, and now he's sort of culminating this idea and saying that this is the logos. So anyway, what is the nature of this logos Heraclitus observes in the world? What's Heraclitus's logos? Well, in a word, it's creation out of opposition. So Heraclitus believes that it is the strife and war of two opposites that produce the world, just as the banks of the river force the waters to flow through. Without the tension between the bank and the water, there wouldn't be a river. Another example, a better example in my opinion, is if you have a harp or some string instrument, it can only produce music through the proper tension of strings within the frame, against the frame. you can't have beautiful music without strife and tension. And this is this interesting thing that he emphasizes is in Homer there's a line, and I can't quote it perfectly like the ancient Greeks could, but that said that, oh, if only there were no more strife in the world. I think it was talking about, oh, if only the Trojan War would end. And Heraclitus comes in and says, that's stupid. You're calling for the destruction of the universe. Which, by the way, is another thing about Heraclitus, he was very blunt, apparently, with people and sort of ticked a lot of people off. In any case, if the strings on the harp were slack, they would produce no music. Similarly, if there was no tension or opposition in our lives, then there wouldn't be much going on in our lives. And this is sort of the main thing that Heraclitus brings up. If there is no proper tension in our lives, then we become without music. We're useless. We're not even there. So Heraclitus teaches that we should harmonize our internal logos with the external logos through the proper moderation of our desires and actions. See, that's interesting, is that by moderating, by properly limiting our desires and actions, we actually produce the needed tension to make those desires and actions so much more richer. If we got everything that we want, this is another aphorism he says, if we got everything we want without any effort, or even with effort if we got everything we want, then we would lose our necessary tension and fall out of alignment with the logos and with the world, and just sort of, life would be kind of boring. According to Heraclitus, the majority of humanity is sort of in this condition, or at least thinking that that would be great. They make no effort to perceive the true nature of the logos around them. They don't try to reflect it on themselves. They're contented by indulgence rather than moderation. And one of the things that would tick people off is he would constantly say that they're like cattle grazing or sows gorging in slop. You're not even human. You're just these cattle, unthinking cattle who just gorge themselves on food. And then this is part of what reminds me of my INTJ friend, because he would say sometimes that bulls are the stupidest animals in the world, because he used to work with bulls and cows, and he was thoroughly unimpressed with how unintelligent they were, in his opinion. In any case, Heraclitus is accusing people of not reflecting the logos. In fact, he extends this to a criticism of the religion of his time. He kind of takes, sort of like Xenophanes, he includes the pagan religions as this sort of indulgence. He was a harsh critic of Orpheism and the shameless abandon involved in its practices, perceiving this as a denial of the logos. The equivalent of the logos was sort of the equivalent of God for Heraclitus. As he says, this world order, the same for all, no God made or any man, but it always was and is and will be like an everlasting fire, kindling by measure and going out by measure. To make just a few more points about Heraclitus, and these aren't on my script, so please excuse me if I'm a little jumpy or spotty, but his idea of strife I've found very important. If any of you know anything about Nietzsche, you'll know that Nietzsche was very much inspired by Heraclitus. And Nietzsche is one of my favorite philosophers. So that's probably also part of the reason why I like Heraclitus so much. Heraclitus has an interesting aphorism where he says essentially that to God nothing is good or bad, everything's good, but to man we distinguish between good or bad. And obviously that can be taken as extreme moral relativism. I don't think it's quite that simple, though. I think it relates directly into his concept of war and strife, is that terrible trials and things will happen, or our country will go to war, or your husband will die in a fire, or all these horrible things will happen. But what Heraclitus is saying, and this probably ticked people off even more, is that we label certain things as good and certain things as bad, but as far as God or the Logos is concerned, he's not saying that it's unconcerned, he's saying that it actually says that everything is good, everything serves a purpose. We can consecrate all these perspectives for our good. We have to take the good and the bad, and in that sense it's all good. Another thing that, just to give you more of a taste of Heraclitus and the way that he wrote and thought, I have a few more aphorisms here. One of them is, the soul is dyed the color of its thoughts. Think only on those things that are in line with your principles and can bear the light of day. The content of your character is your choice. Day by day, what you do is who you become. Your integrity is your destiny. It is the light that guides your way. He gets almost a sense of the religious here, the very spiritual, which I think is very interesting, and you can probably tell that I'm very much biased here. I apologize for that, but I'm just trying to give, because he has been very influential on Jungian typology and also on future philosophers. Next time we will talk about sort of Heraclitus's direct opposition, Parmenides, the wonderful Parmenides, and that is an interesting story, and those two will duke it out until Plato, and will duke it out even after that. So thank you for watching. Put your comments or questions or criticisms in the comments section below, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.